Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY called Glintstone Chapter 17 Hole, written by some guy named Ted. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you'll enjoy. We had arrived at Skavalka, the planet of the metal beings. It floated in space, a dark blue orb splattered with green. We didn't know where the best place to land would be, so Clint sent a message over comms, and now we waited for a response. It was not long in coming. Clint drove Susan forward and landed her in the middle of the largest city on the surface. He lowered the ramp, and we got out. The sun blazed overhead, and the air was comfortable temperature, similar to that of a warm spring day. Translation note: spring on Earth, changed from summer on Tedx's home planet. Clint and I stood in the middle of a long, wide, brick-paved road. On either side of the road rose stone buildings, most likely houses, pushing several stories into the sky. In the distance, a tall metal tower reflected the sun's light, lining the streets. In between the houses were tall green plants similar to the appearance to trees. But it was not the scenery that drew my attention. No. That was on the three beings walking towards us, standing shoulder to shoulder. I could see the sun glinting off of their metal exteriors. The tales were true. There were truly metal beings on Skavalka. As they approached, I could hear a faint ticking noise, a ping of metal tapping metal. The stone on the road clanked with every step and every metal feet. The metal beings continued until they stood a mere 6 feet in front of us. I took the chance to study them. The shortest of them was several inches taller than me, and the tallest stood over Clint. They were bipedal, as was to be expected. Most beings were. 2 arms as well. A head sat on shoulders that were not bulky, but rather narrow and slender. The beings' bodies spoke of grace and beauty, not of brutality and strength. Their arms were rather long in proportion to their bodies, the tips of the fingers reaching down almost to their knees. Their hands were peculiar by themselves. Very long, slender fingers, each the same length, came from a small palm. There were only 3 fingers and a thumb. The skin covering the beings was very smooth. I did not see a single wrinkle or bend in the space of their bodies, no imperfection in the strange smoothness. The beings were completely naked, in so much as one could be naked when they were built of metal. There were no distinguishing features to signify sex. Their faces were the strangest feature. Despite the rest, a smooth surface covered the front of the head where the eyes and nose and mouth should have been, and instead there was a screen, similar to the screen on my vid player. One that the screen was projected was a basic outline of a mouth and eyes, just 2 circles for eyes and a curved line for a smile. "You are the beings that hailed us," said the middle being, the shortest of the 3. It was not a question, but a statement of fact. The being's voice was not metallic as I had expected, but rich and full of variations in pitch and tone. My ears, it was beautiful. "What do you wish from us?" Clint stepped forward and pushed back his sleeve, showing them a stump where his hand had much of his forearm used to be. "I want a metal hand. I heard that you could give me one." "For hundreds of years we have lived here," the being on the right, the tallest one of the 3, said. "And for hundreds of years beings have come here, seeking that which you have not, to seek a hand. Others, feet, tails, arms. To each and every one of them we gave them their desire, and each and every one of them died. I tell you this not to threaten you, but to enlighten you. The outside species are not strong enough to survive the process through which metal is attached to the body. Only we, the Randak, are strong enough. If you try to regain that which you have lost through our ways, you will die." Clint opened up his mouth to argue, but the Randak, the medium-height one, the one on the left of him, "Thousands have come here and thousands have died. When we realized that none could survive the process, we cut off all contact with the outside world. To save them the pain of rejection, the pain of having their souls crushed. But they did not stop coming. We were first to blow up our sun, and we sent our planet flying through the cosmos until it came to rest here, on the far edge of the galaxy. Think on that when you consider whether or not you desire that missing limb. We are unwilling to destroy our home world and exile ourselves to the edges of the galaxy to avoid adding more bodies to our count. If it doesn't work, why would you still do it to them? They come here and you tell them they will die and they still want it anyway. Couldn't you just say no? I asked, confused. The logic was not making sense. Moving a planet was infinitely more difficult than just saying no. Because our God demands it, the tall one said, in a tone that said that it was the sanest thing that he should have said in his life. Excuse me? I asked, incredulous. Your God tells you to attach metal to beings and kill them. No, the short one said. He tells us all beings are free to accept his love, and to accept his love, you must be metal. Those who die are not strong enough to live with his love. I could not believe my ears. The metal beings of Skavalka were a religious cult. They made themselves into immortal machines because they thought that their God wanted them to. Perhaps some of the most advanced scientific knowledge and engineering skills in the galaxy were being used to honor a non-existent god. Suddenly, I did not know if coming here was the best idea. If we tried to leave, the Randak might decide that we needed to be shown to the god's love, and if we wanted it or not. I am strong enough, Clint said, with a stubborn voice of his. No one has been, said the medium one, but you look like you may be. Clint did not say anything, but walked forward and grabbed the tallest being by the upper arm. Before I could stop him, or even register what he was doing, he lifted the metal being into the air with his right arm, holding him there. Even with only one hand, Clint's stone was immensely strong. The being's face did not change from the two circles that aligned. Yes, you are physically strong, yes, said the tall being, clutching his grip, but the being sounded completely at ease, unconcerned that he was held in the air by a being smaller than he was. But are you strong in heart? In blood, and strength does not determine if you will survive. The process is strenuous and will bring a great deal of pain. I'm strong, Clint growled. He sent the being down. Anyways, there is nothing that you can say that will stop me from getting my new arm. I have been broken long enough. I wish to be whole. Then we will give you a new arm. You will feel the love of anarchy. But we will tell you one more time. You will not survive. This is the last time we will warn you, said the short being. Clint shook his head. I don't care. I will be strong enough. Give me a new arm. The three beings bowed in unison, bending forward at the waist a few degrees. They turned and began to walk away towards the gleaming tower in the distance. I looked at Clint, but he had already begun to follow them. I walked after Clint, thinking that I would try to persuade them to give up on this crazy idea. But I caught a glimpse of his face. It was enough to silence any complaint that I had. The stone paved road gave way to metal streets. Then the buildings changed from stone to metal. The further we walked into the city center, the more the pattern emerged. The streets grew straighter, the buildings straightened out in neat rows. Ahead, the tallest towers flashed in sunlight, huge and ominous. I could see no imperfections in the steel tower, no more than I could see in the metal beings we followed. They should be one smooth expanse of steel. Metal stairs rose out of the tower's base as we climbed them. They were long, and my calves soon began to burn, as each step was designed for a taller being than me and one who could not tire. At the top, I could see the doors, giant burnished doors constructed of the same metal as the tower. I turned to form the climb to see how far we'd come. I was astonished at the height that we climbed. We stood over the tallest of the metal houses. From this vantage point, the pattern became clear. The straight lines in the street where rows of houses all pointed to this tower. I turned my head and I turned and saw the lines forming a great circle around the tower. A strange feeling lay over the city. I could not put my finger on it, but it made my skin crawl. It was something important, but I did not know what it was. The more I looked, the more I noticed the buildings closest to the tower were built entirely of metal. The further out from the tower the buildings were, the less metal was in them, until they were entirely stone. It was as if the tower radiated metal and coated the city with it. It occurred to me that thought may have not been far off. Every religion needs a place of worship. Perhaps this was the temple of metal. 3 of the Randaks stopped in front of the doors and placed their hands in holes shaped for them. There was a glimmer of light and the door split open down the middle. Swinging inward, we walked into the shadow of the tower. I walked by the door and something caught my eye. I looked closely and I could see that it was not actually smooth. In the metal, so tiny that I was nearly invisible, even 6 inches away I could see the minuscule symbols spread across the whole of the door. I bent to the ground and I saw that the ground was covered in the strange symbols as well. I looked at the metal beings walking ahead of us, and I was willing to bet that they would be covered in the strange markings as well. We followed the Randak deep into the tower, winding this way and that through the polished metal corridors. I made to talk with Clint several times, but he raised a hand to stop me. He did not want to do anything that could offend the beings and make them refuse him a hand. The beings passed under a large arch, entering into a room with a full metal door set into the far wall. The tallest being opened the door with his hands, as before, and held it open. Clint walked in, and I made to follow. The shortest metal of the beings stopped in front of me. "Only those who seek the love of an Agi may enter the sanctuary, unless you wish," the being said to me. I backed off hurriedly. They nodded at me and followed Clint into the space beyond the door. Closing behind it, it shut with an ominous boom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I paced the room outside the door, waiting for Clint to emerge. I paced in circles, then in squares, then in triangles as the time dragged on. The minutes slipped by, and then the hours. I sat against the wall, closing my eyes. I closed them for a moment, but I was swept off to sleep, exhausted by the worry and pacing. I awoke to a blood-curdling scream. The sound was unlike anything that I had ever heard in my life. It was a sharp and piercing striking to the marrow. In the same instant, I was deep and immersive, encompassing everything it touched. I felt it wrap around my heart, which was in my throat. The sound was undeniably Clint. It seemed beyond his abilities, but it was he who emitted that sound. It trailed off into a faint whimper, and then silence. I jumped up and I smashed my fists into the door. My fingers were scrabbling for a purchase as I tried to rip it from its hinges. I gave way as I tumbled backwards, landing on my back. A hand emerged from the darkness, and I saw a light flash off the metal. The rest of the being followed, and I stared up in shock as the man of stone and metal. Clint Stone stood before me, his right hand in flesh and blood. His left was made of shining, glistening metal. He raised a hand and wiggled his fingers at me. A smile split his face, and I could see a great weight lift off his shoulders. Clint strode out of the doorway and gripped me by the arm, lifting me to my feet as he clapped me on the shoulder. Still grinning like a madman, he did all of this with his left hand, which, until recently, had been a stump. Now it was covered with an arm and a hand, and it was truly a miracle that I was witnessing. Clint was staring at his hand, flexing his fingers and rolling his wrist. His hand seemed strange, though. It was not a human hand attached to Clint, but rather a Randak hand. 3 long, slender fingers and a long forearm were connected to the human upper arm. Clint didn't seem to mind as he looked up at me. "We've got somewhere to be," he said, and strode off. "Aren't you going to tell me what's happening?" I asked, incredulous. "I'll tell you on the way." End of chapter. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. If you wish to support the author, there is a link to the original story, so pop over there and give him your support. If you wish to support this channel, however, there are a few ways to do so. The best and easiest would be to share this video with other people, as well as liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. All of these things tell the algorithm that this channel is at least vaguely interesting, and that may share it with other people. If you wish to support the channel in some other manner, watching my other videos would also help tremendously. Or, if you really like, there is a link down below to leave a tip or to join the Patreon. Any and all support is very much appreciated. And I hope that you all have a good one until the next time, and I'll see you then. Cheers.